thevoicebeforthevoid.net. How Cowboys Die in North Dakota. From The Wilderness Hunter by Theodore Roosevelt. Read by The Voice Before the Void. Last spring, one of the 3-7 riders, a magnificent horseman, was killed on the roundup near Belfield, his horse bucking and falling on him. It was accounted a plumb gentle horse, too, said my informant, only it sometimes sulked and acted a little mean when it was cinched up behind. The unfortunate rider did not know of this failing of the plumb gentle horse, and as soon as he was in the saddle, it threw itself over sideways with a great bound, and he fell on his head and never spoke again. Such accidents are too common in the wild country to attract very much attention. The men accept them with grim quiet, as inevitable in such lives as theirs, lives that are harsh and narrow in their toil and their pleasure alike, and that are ever bounded by an iron horizon of hazard and hardship. During the last year and a half, 3 other men from the ranches in my immediate neighborhood have met their deaths in the course of their work. One, a trail boss of the OX, was drowned while swimming his herd across a swollen river. Another, one of the fancy ropers of the W Bar, was killed while roping cattle in a corral. His saddle turned, the rope twisted round him, he was pulled off, and trampled to death by his own horse. The 4th man, a cowpuncher named Hamilton, lost his life during the last week of October, 1891, in the first heavy snowstorm of the season. Yet he was a skilled plainsman, on ground he knew well, and just before straying himself, had successfully instructed 2 men who did not know the country how to get to camp. They were all 3 with the roundup, and were making a circle through the Badlands. The wagons had camped on the eastern edge of these Badlands when they merged into the prairie, at the head of an old disused road, which led about due east from the Little Missouri. It was a gray, lowering day, and as darkness came on, Hamilton's horse played out, and he told his 2 companions not to wait, as it had begun to snow, but to keep on towards the north, skirting some particularly rough buttes, and as soon as they struck the road, to turn to the right and follow it out to the prairie, where they would find camp. He particularly warned them to keep a sharp lookout, so as not to pass over the dim trail unawares in the dusk and the storm. They followed his advice and reached camp safely, and after they had left him, nobody ever saw him again alive. Evidently he himself, plodding northwards, passed over the road without seeing it in the gathering gloom. Probably he struck it at some point where the ground was bad, and the dim trail in consequence disappeared entirely, as is the way with these prairie roads, making them landmarks to be used with caution. He must then have walked on, over rugged hills and across deep ravines until his horse came to a standstill. He took off its saddle and picketed it to a dwarfed ash. Its frozen carcass was found with the saddle nearby 2 months later. He now evidently recognized some landmark and realized that he had passed the road and was far to the north of the roundup wagons. But he was a resolute, self-confident man, and he determined to strike out for a line camp, which he knew lay about due east of him, 2 or 3 miles out on the prairie, on one of the head branches of Knife River. Night must have fallen by this time, and he missed the camp, probably passing it within less than a mile. But he did pass it, and with it all hopes of life, and walked wearily on to his doom, through the thick darkness and the driving snow. At last his strength failed, and he lay down in the tall grass of a little hollow. 5 months later, in the early spring, the riders from the line camp found his body, resting, face downwards, with the forehead on the folded arms.